Well, and welcome everybody. This is a special edition of Around the Paw. And you know what? It is not very often that we do dedication episodes. Well, this is going to be an episode that is dedicated to three very special individuals. And I say special in a very loose way possible. And we're, of course, talking about our three officials that happened to wander into Cameron Indoor Arena last night at Duke and find themselves in the middle of a basketball game that I don't know what they possibly could have thought that it was, but if they were officials, well, you sure could have fooled me. Because, guys, we were there. We were sitting courtside. We were on press row. We were about as close to the action as you could possibly be. And when I say unequivocally for the record and as vehemently as I possibly can, that those three individuals muddied, sullied, ruined what was otherwise one heck of a basketball game in an iconic venue in front of a raucous crowd with two very good basketball teams. And unfortunately, that's not what last night's going to be remembered by or remembered for.
Not at all.
I agree. I think looking at the score, it's a game between two basketball teams. But anybody that watched it, I mean, Duke fans, obviously, there might be a different opinion. But from Clemson fans, you look on Clemson Twitter, you talk to any of the players, you listen to Brad Brownow's interview. It's a stinger. It's a really just stinging loss, especially with how the game went and the whole comeback story. Clemson were down 7 with like 14 minutes to go in the contest. 7 minutes later, they had the lead, and that was their first lead, and they had a 4-point lead with 2 minutes to go. It's very tough to explain, like put into words what happened, but do I agree with the calls? And I consider myself a very honest person. I really don't. With some of them, even on either side, I think that there were no calls, travels. But yeah, it really sucks when you're gonna put a game into the hands of people that aren't even playing in the game in terms of the referees. But it's part of the game. Poor officiating is part of the game. The Tigers are almost able to drown it out, but it just happens. It's basketball. It stings. You just got to move on to the next game. As awful as it is, as awful as you want to take this game back yesterday, it's just a stinger. That's all I can really say about it. It's just a disappointing loss.
Before I go on a rant about the refs, Clemson did some things in this game, like turn the ball over and throw the ball away and stuff like that, that if they didn't do that, we win the ball game. So it's just not totally on the refs, but all right, now I'm switching to the refs. They were horrible. Like, there are multiple times in that game that Duke just mauled Clemson, and then there are times when Duke goes driving to the lane and we don't even touch the guy and they call a foul. And it's bad.
We're going to get to that in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just bad when and I had an idea going into this game that after Duke losing to Pitt and the way that game ended and what happened after the game, like, Duke was not going to lose. And I just had that feeling. But I didn't think that it would be – I didn't think that the refs would take the game into their hands. And that's what they did. Like, it was terrible. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. And being courtside was amazing. But it was also – you could see what was going on. You could hear what the players were saying. And – you can't do that, man.
No,
you can't take the game into your hands.
You're exactly right. And I think that probably the first inclination that all of us got that things were about to go off the rails and go south in one big damn hurry was the technical foul that was called very early on. And I get it. Look, the NCAA, and this is blanket, this is across the board, basketball, football, tiddlywinks. For all they give a damn. They are trying to cut out taunting and anything that might be seen as, trying to get in people's heads, so whatever terminology or whatever they want to use or whatever they want to call it to justify these tightened new rules. But you give a technical foul to a kid for scoring a basket and literally just handing the ball to the Duke player to inbound the basketball. He never said a word. He never looked at him. He never mean mugged him. There was nothing there. And I was on the opposite end of the court. I will digress. I wasn't that close to it when it happened, but I've seen up close video and I've seen it slowed down. There was nothing there that remotely rose to the level of taunting. He took the basketball and handed it to the Duke guy to inbound and gets called for a technical foul. It was something that Brad Brownell, and this is a direct quote in his postgame press conference, said was ridiculous. And it was, frankly, ridiculous.
I will say I did have a better view first half. I was in the auxiliary press box, so I was looking down on that basket. Same thing. I really, and I've had an opinion on basketball refs as a whole, like NBA prime example, because you see these guys showing a little bit of extra emotion, technical, flagrant, stuff happens like that. But I really didn't see something like that. As soon as the whistle blew, I knew for a fact the technical was going to be called because that stuff just happens. And, you hear all this stuff about blue blood bias. I'm going to stand completely neutral on that. I'm not going to, take a side on that. Just because it just happens. It's part of the game. There's poor officiating, but I'm just going to go back to Cliff's point. You're up 4, under 2 minutes. Shefflin grabs a rebound, tries to pass the ball inbounds. Not a heads-up play. Jared McCain steals it, scores a layup. You can't do that. You can't do that. And put him in striking distance. Filipowski N1. Duke retook the lead, and that's all she wrote. I mean, PJ was able to do whatever he could, but I think, and I was talking to somebody, I forget who it was, or I was texting somebody, and 7 seconds left. Duke had way too much time, and I said the ball was going to fall to McCain or Proctor. They were going to push into Gerard, Chase Hunter, or Beadle. Foul called, or they're going to successfully earn themselves a layup. That's all I saw. But yeah, I do say there was very poor officiating in this game. And that's not from a Clemson fan. I mean, you could listen to guys after the game. Reese Davis, Seth Greenberg, Jay Williams, a Duke alum, all said the same thing. They didn't believe that Tyrese Proctor's shot at the end was a foul. I believe that he, acted it out and the ref saw it. That's it. Like, then again, it's part of the game. You got to finish. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, and Cliff, I don't know if we've got the actual. Do we have the actual video of that final play? If not, for those who haven't seen it, we've all seen the slowed down video and the frame by frame. This is actually some clips from earlier in the game. Cliff, we'll just hold off on a second on this. But when we're talking about the final play of the game with Josh Beadle defending Tyrese Proctor, even if you want to admit or say that Beadle did make some contact with Proctor, which there was some contact there, and I'll admit that there was, but it was minimal contact. But when you look at that play prior to any contact that Beadle might have made, Proctor traveled. By the actual definition of the traveling rule, he traveled. And then he extended his off arm not once, but twice, and used it to clear Beadle backwards. He physically pushed him backwards to create that space. And so any contact that Beadle made on that play was simply as an attempt to recover himself from being moved off of the ball and from a legal defensive position and get back in the play. So you call the foul on Beadle, but you miss the travel and the 2 blatant push-offs prior to that. And look, I've seen enough basketball in 30 years that in that situation, 99.9% of the time, it's a no call. You're not going to call the offensive foul. You're not going to call the defensive foul. I would have been perfectly fine with the no call. You don't need to call an offensive foul there, even though that it happened twice. Just don't call anything. It's canceled out by the fact that Beadle recovered from being pushed off and was able to come back and make a play. Just let it go. And I think that's all that any Clemson fan or any neutral party who's a fan of the game of basketball and who wants to see the integrity of the office of officials upheld. That's all they're saying. And that's what Jay Williams, a Duke legend, was even able to put aside his personal bias and say, don't blow the whistle. It's a no call. It boggles my mind that you take the game, both from Clemson and for Duke, you take the game out of the players' hands by interjecting yourself and blowing the whistle when there should have been no whistle to begin with. It's egregious, and it's not something that I think the NCAA should sit idly by. I think it's something that they should address. It's something they need to come out and say, look, this is what happened. Our guys made a mistake, but unfortunately, we know they're never going to do that because officials, for whatever reason, are protected above all else. They are the most protected entity in the professional world and are considered above reproach. No, make their asses sit down at a podium and answer for what they called. If coaches,
I said that last night.
Players have
I said that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I said that last night. Like,
and put them under the microscope.
They
and
need
if not, then what are we doing?
Yeah, they need to be put in front of a mic at the end of the game so they can get scrutinized in public. And I know that's crazy, but it needs to happen. Like, if we can scrutinize a player and if we can scrutinize a coach, then why can't we scrutinize a ref? Like, why can't we put them in front of a mic and have the press ask them questions? Like,
I mean, you see this. You see this in every contact sport. Soccer, you see it in football. If there is a holding call on a pass interference, penalty's offset. It happens a lot in basketball too. I constantly see a push off and then a foul, and then the defender is always calling the foul. I personally thought Josh Beadle played good defense. I really do. And this loss should not fall on him. I don't think this loss should fall on anybody. I think the game was, like you said, Garrett, put out of the players' hands, not only on Clemson's side, but Duke's side. Sometimes you just got to let the teams play. And I thought a push-off was potential. I think there was a push-off? Yes. The contact was there. There you go. They offset. There's your offensive foul gone, your defensive foul. You just got to let the kids play. Exactly. And especially down the line, I'd say Filipowski's N1 too. Cliff, I think you have the video. I think it is the N1 where he went to Shefflin. Shefflin had his hands wide open, feet planted, and they called him on the N1. And that 1 point bucket.
Let's check this out. Now, we talked about how Clemson was constantly mauled and mugged with no fouls being called. Well, these are some of the fouls called on Clemson.
Yeah. Well, first, let's give credit to the video. This is Chase Justice of YFF4 in Greenville. But yeah, this play right here is insane. And
what more is Shefflin supposed to do? He's straight up in the air.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like, it's just like, it's crazy. Like, he's got, I mean, here's another example right here. Here's a still shot. Like, tell me that is not a foul. Not a foul. The only way I can see that being a foul is if he jumped. And he didn't, that I know of. And so that's just, to me, not a foul at all.
Well, Cliff, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to venture a guess that the 3 South Carolina Gamecock fans who somehow found themselves courtside behind the basket at Cameron Indoor last night are going to make their way to the comment section on this video and try to explain why that was, in fact, a foul. But frankly, I think those poor guys were trying to get back to Columbia. I think they just got lost. I think they got lost and just wandered into Cameron Indoor to get out of the rain and found themselves sitting courtside. But, it's a total shame that the game ended the way it did, if for no other reason than had that foul not been called at the end, then they would have had the perfect seat in the house to watch P.J. Hall hit the 2-game winning free throws. So, that's as much of that's almost in a minor way as much of a shame as the end result. But, I digress.
Yeah.
We've talked about it. I mean, it's very tough to lose a game that's not put in your hands. To at least to many Clemson fans, to the players too. I'm sure you could talk to them, and you saw the frustration from guys like Joe Girard, who went after the referee. Brownell had to hold him back. It shows. And, these guys are experienced players. PJ Hall, a senior, Shefflin, a junior, Gerard, a fifth-year player. He's played in games like these before. He knows what's a foul and knows what's not a foul. Just happens.
Yeah,
But
here's another tweet by our friend at ClemsonSports.com, Matt Conley. He said, after Clemson tied the game at 59 with 5:54 left, Duke shot 13 free throws. 13 free throws. And Duke, they were 7 of 12. That was on their last 7 possessions.
Right. They attempted
7 or 12
they
possessions.
attempted free throws on 7 of their final 12 possessions.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And it's crazy.
And you look at the overall free throw totals. Duke attempted 33 free throws in the ball game. Clemson attempted 22. For a major college basketball game between two teams that I consider very evenly matched, that's a fairly big discrepancy, particularly when you back it up with the video clips and the video evidence that's out there. But, guys, I want to talk about some of the stats here for a minute, too, because we have those as well. And when you look at the free throw discrepancy, 33 for Duke and 22 for Clemson, now set that aside and look at the statistical categories across much of the rest of the board. Clemson made 23 shots in last night's game. Duke made 21. Clemson had 15 second chance points. Duke had 0. Clemson out-rebounded Duke 42-33. Turnovers were fairly even. Clemson 9 turnovers, Duke 7. Points off turnovers, Duke had just a little bit. But for as much as we talked about in the first half, Clemson was struggling from the three-point line. Well, they ended up hitting 7 threes. Duke hit 9. So 3-point shots were essentially negated. That was given the fact that Clemson made 2 more shots from the field, the 2 more threes made by Duke essentially negates that. So, when you look at everything from a statistical standpoint and you put it all together, Clemson dominated that ballgame. They were, for most of the night, except for that one Duke run midway through the first half, Clemson was the better basketball team. The stats back that up. And so if in a worst-case scenario the statistics cancel each other out, then what does it come back to? The number of fouls called against Clemson, the lack of fouls called against Duke, and the discrepancy in free throws attempted and made. 33-22.
Yeah,
that's not something that can be ignored, guys.
No, this is what gets me, man. And I told you this last night riding home. Like, we talked about, I think you said something about turnovers. It was Clemson 6, Duke 13, right? Points in the paint, we beat them 26-22. Second chance. This is what's crazy. I was like, kind of blew me away. Clemson was 15 and Duke had 0 second chance points. They beat us in fast break points, 18-12. And the bench points blew me away too. We beat them 20-6. Yeah. Bench points. We beat them 20-6.
Duke didn't really use their bench much. The biggest thing though, and it's hard at Clemson. Free throws. Duke was I think that 63% from free throws. Kyle Filipowski 5 for 11 from free throws. He missed 2 a couple times. Caleb Foster from Duke missed 2 free throws. You have to take advantage of that. Look at the North Carolina game, for example. Clemson shot an abysmal 3-point percentage. North Carolina won. Clemson shot an abysmal 3-point percentage. They missed 2 free throws at home against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech won that game. That's the difference between a team that could be, a 16-3, 15-4 team compared to a team that is looking at the middle of the ACC and has been, rumors of not making the NCAA tournament after such an incredible start. That's why. And I mean, you could implement the refs into it, but at the end of the day, Clemson were up 4 with under 2 minutes to go with the ball, and they gave it up. And
I agree with you, man.
At that point, you can't put it in the referee's hands. You did that, and it sucks. And we can talk about it forever, and we can talk about the technical foul. We can talk about the fouls that occurred when, Godfrey was fouled by Filipowski. That wasn't called. It goes both ways. Clemson were up 4, 2 minutes to go. They had the ball. Shefflin gave it to McCain. McCain stole it, took it up. 1 possession game. Especially with teams that are ranked top 12, regardless of what you think about Duke. teams are going to beat you if they're a top 15 team and they're just going to gift you turnovers. That's what's going to happen. And it sucks. It stings. You got to bounce back against Louisville on Tuesday, which I think this team can do. It's going to sting for a while. But trust me, if these two teams meet again, let's say ACC tournament, let's say NCAA tournament for some reason, I do think that there will be a different outcome. I think this team is pissed off about the way that it goes. You have a much lighter schedule besides North Carolina. I really think that this team is going to take it and use it as motivation because that's what an experienced squad does, and that's what Clemson, I believe, at least, is going to do.
Yeah, I think they'll come back and they'll play well against. I know it's a short turnaround with it being on Tuesday, but it's a night game. It's a after dark game, like they like to call it, and grid after dark. So it's a late game. But I think they'll come back because Louisville. What's Louisville's record? Like 6 and something crazy. It's not great.
The most points per game in the ACC. They give up the best 3-point percentage. I really think that Clemson can get their offense going, especially playing a defensive juggernaut in Virginia next weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they can too.
Well, guys, we're going to end this show here in just a minute. I do want to throw some positive things out there to end this show. But before we do that, we would be remiss if we didn't get one more shot in because we were talking about this prior to recording, and we were all shaking our heads about this in the post-game press conference last night. And Cliff and I think we probably talked about it for a good 30 minutes to start the drive home. But what do you make of the comments from Duke head coach John Scheyer? Because he was asked, this is after Coach Brownell had spoken. And look, Brad Brownell, if you've watched the press conference or read any of the stories and seen the quotes, Brad Brownell point blank said this game was taken from us. It was taken out of our hands and taken from us.
And then he walked out.
His direct quote, and then he got up and walked out. He was pissed off, and rightfully so. And so John Scheyer comes in and is essentially put on the spot and asked to elaborate on Brad Brownell's comments from his perspective. And what does John Scheyer have to say to that? The man who quite literally was just handed the win, says, well, I could sit here and go on and on about all the times my team was hit and mauled and pushed in the back, and there were no calls.
Yeah.
Are you really arrogant enough, John Scheyer, who has never known any other program but Duke? You played there. You coached there as an assistant coach, and now you're the head coach. It's the only program you've ever known. Are you really going to let your Duke privilege show that greatly that you're going to sit there and in a moment of astounding arrogance going to criticize the officials yourself after they just put the game on a sterling silver platter and handed it to you with an apple on top for good measure? Dude, be quiet. Nobody wants to hear it. Just state your piece and go.
Clemson's just a physical team. Experienced big teams are going to be physical, and Duke played small ball, started 3 guards. There's not really much you could say. I mean, you kind of just have to go on to the next one, but you have to credit what this team did. Duke went on a 17-4 run where they were up by 12 towards the end of the second half. Clemson rallied 6 points, went down by 6. And like I said, they were down by 7 points with like 14 minutes to go. They took a lead 7 minutes later. You have to appreciate what they did in probably one of the toughest places to play in college basketball. I think Cameron Indoor is a top 5 place to play in terms of how difficult it is. And you were able to do that.
It's definitely a bucket list too. Bucket list place to go.
It's surreal, and it was a dream come true for me growing up watching it. But yeah, there's so much to say, but the best you could do is bounce back. You have a couple games to boost your resume. You have tournament play where if you shock the world and upset a team like UNC, or you get your revenge on Duke, there's your bid, and there's the whole respect of the college basketball world back.
Yeah, and that's
I agree, man. I agree. All I want to say about John Scheyer is he just slapped Brownell in the face. That's all he did. And I just wanted to make a comment on that. And He just slapped him in the face. I mean, that's just a slap in the face. But I will say this, and it's not all the refs' faults, and if we don't turn the ball over those last 2 turnovers, we win that ball game easily. And that's it. That's all you can do now. That game's over. The players, the coaches, everybody's turned their head to Louisville. And like I said earlier, it's a short turnaround, and we just need to go in there and just murder Louisville.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and look, at the end of the day, we're all Clemson fans as well. So this is in a sense kind of our way but to also vent a little bit of our frustration and maybe vicariously those who don't have the same outlet or platform who will watch this video. Maybe it helps them cope as well. So then, hey, guys, that's what we're here for. We love it when you watch it. If we can help you in any way, then that's what we're going to do. But I do think that it needs to be said on a positive note as we end this show. And Griff, you touched on it, and so did Clifton. Look, Cameron Indoor Arena, it is a cathedral of college basketball. It is, if you are a fan of college basketball in general, doesn't matter if you have a rooting interest, it's a place you need to see a game. And we were fortunate to see the game courtside and to have some of the best views and seats in the house. But also for the fact that, Griffin, as you said, Clemson was down by 12 points in the first half. A lot of teams that go into Cameron Indoor Arena that fall down by 12 points in the first half don't ever climb out of that hole. And the game goes the other way. It didn't for the Tigers. 6-0 run to end the half. Then they kept clawing back in the second half. They took the lead and were in a position to win the ball game. So regardless at the end of what you felt about the calls or what we feel about the calls, a lot of credit has to be given to Coach Brad Brownell and the Clemson Tigers, because quite frankly, it was a master class of how not to give up in a basketball game and how to fight your way back. Turnovers, you've got to work on that. Those are things that you can control. That wasn't the ball wasn't given away by the refs back to Duke. You did that. So work on that. Work on closing games out at the end. But at the same time, unbelievable job by the Clemson Tigers of getting back in that ball game. Unfortunate how it ended, but they did put themselves in a position to win in one of the toughest places to play. All I can say is great job, guys.
Yeah, it shows heart, man. It shows a lot of heart, a lot of character. And and I know a lot of Clemson fans are proud, but pissed off at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, prove them wrong. I think that's a great message. You have plenty of games, like I've said, to boost your resume, and you have to. You got to use this as motivation. Using frustration as motivation is some of the best motivation and some of the best fuel that a team could use. And we've seen plenty of teams, whether Clemson teams or not, that have used the adversity to turn it into wins, to turn it into incredible performances. So if you're Brad Brownell, if you're any of the Clemson players, now you just got to prove it. Prove the whole world wrong. Prove why you deserve to be not only a top team in the ACC, but a top team in the NCAA, because you were, I believe it was 12th at one point in the country. Do I think this team could be 12th in the country? I think that they have the tools to do that. They're very experienced. Yeah. They have plenty of hell. You took a 12-point comeback back and took it in your own hands at Duke, which is very hard to play, like you guys have said. So there's plenty to be optimistic about. It's a tough loss. It's a really stinging loss, but you just have to bounce back. That's the name of the game in sports.
Yep. And Clemson can do it, man. They can do it. I know they can. So.
No doubt about it. Well, at the end of the day, it's still a great day to be a Clemson Tiger. And we hope everybody enjoyed this special edition of Around the Paul. This was rather spontaneous. Clifton and I talked about doing this on the way home from Durham last night. And we thought that people might enjoy something a little special today. So we hope you do. And if you do like what we do here on Around the Paul, then hit that like and subscribe button. Give us a share. It helps out with the algorithm, and it helps us out too, and it lets us know that you enjoy what we're doing. Now, we're going to be back on Wednesday with our regular weekly episode of Around the Paul. We've got a lot to talk about. Elite Junior Day. some football commits, and Clemson's rebound game against the Louisville Cardinals. So you're not going to want to miss that. That's coming up on Wednesday. But until then, guys, Griffin, it was great to meet you in person last night. After 8 months of doing Around the Paul, we finally got to meet face to face and shake hands. So you know what? If nothing else went the Tigers' way last night, the pleasure was mine, and so glad to meet you, man.
Absolutely. Same way. I mean, it was the first time the three of us were in the same room together, and first of many. I mean, it only took 8 months, right? But yeah, it was a pleasure to meet you as well. And I'll probably see you again. I'll be at Clemson basketball games. I'll be at baseball games. I'll be at football games. It's only until we meet again in person.
Yeah. Well, look, you ask anybody around my hometown, they'll tell you I'm a very hard person to get rid of. So.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm just great to have you guys on staff. So, and have you guys around the company and everything. You guys are definitely assets to the company for sure.
Yeah. Well, Cliff, we appreciate you as well. We appreciate everybody watching out there. And so until next time, for those of us here at Around the Paul, Garrett Mitchell, Griffin Barfield, and Clifton Kennedy, shake it off, move on, rebound. Let's beat Louisville. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.